Interval notation refers to another form that we could write a span of numbers. So let's say we have x is greater than 4. So what does that mean? The values of x that we're looking at have to be greater than 4. So 4.1, 5, 17, any of those numbers. We call this the inequality or the algebraic form. We can even graph this on a number line. So let's say 0 somewhere over here. We know 4 is to the right of that. And since x has to be greater than 4, then we're shading to the right. A neat little trick. If you draw a little arrow in the inequality symbol, it points in the direction that you should be shading. Now, since it's greater than, we say strictly greater than because it doesn't say that it could be equal to 4. So on a number line, we'll generally put an open circle right there to show that this is our starting point, but 4 is not included. So this is the number line or the graphing form of relaying the same information. So interval notation will again say the same information, just in a different notation or form. So interval notation will always be written smallest to biggest or greatest. So the smallest number x could be, or our starting value is 4, and there's no limit on it, so it's just anything greater than 4. So we can, in this instance, go all the way up to infinity. Now, interval notation will either use a parenthesis or a bracket, depending on if the value is included or not. If the value is not included or it can't be equal to that value, then we'll use a parenthesis. So if we have a strictly less than or greater than symbol, then that will go to a parenthesis. So this is if it's not equal. If our value can be equal to that number, then we'd use a bracket. So if we had less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, meaning that that value is actually included or can be equal to that value, then we'll use a bracket. We have just strictly greater than here, and we used it in an open circle. All of those things will relate back to using the parenthesis. So 4 cannot be included, so it gets a parenthesis. Now, infinity is not actually a number. It's just kind of a scary place down at the end of the number line. So we can never actually be equal to infinity. So infinity and negative infinity will always get a parenthesis. So here's the interval notation of this inequality in this graphed number line. So let's do one more. Let's say that x is less than or equal to negative 5. So a couple of different things here. Here we have less than. I like to start off graphing it on a number line to get an idea of what's going on. So if x is less than or equal to negative 5, first off, so let's put 0, negative 5 is to the left of that on the number line. Since it has the equal to bar, I know that negative 5 is actually part of my solution, so I'm going to do a closed circle right there to show that negative 5 is included, or it can be equal to that value. And this says less than, so all the numbers that are to the left of negative 5 on the number line, so negative 6, negative 7, so on and so forth. And again, we just do a little line right there, gives us an arrow pointing to the left. So here is the number line version of that value. Now, what does the interval or interval notation look like? So again, remember that the interval will go from smallest to biggest. So what is the smallest value we can have? Well, our numbers are going to the left of negative 5 to the arrow, indicating that it's not going to stop. So this will keep going down forever and ever and ever in the direction of negative infinity. So this is our smallest quote-unquote value. Remember that infinity and negative infinity aren't actually numbers, so they will not be included. And so the biggest number then would be negative 5. And since it has the equal bar, we have the shaded or closed circle, this gets a bracket. And there's our interval notation. All right, so we looked at interval notation when we have infinity in the interval. What does it look like? Go over there. let's say we have -6 is less than x, less than or equal to 4. So now our values are contained in an interval, -6 to 4. So again, I like to do number line so I can kind of see what's going on here. The furthest it goes to the left is -6, and to the right is +4. If we look at it one side at a time, we kind of have to read it backwards, but this says x is greater than -6, so I know it's going to the right of -6, and since it's strictly greater than, I'll have an open circle. And the other side says that x is less than or equal to 4. So equal to, I know automatically gives me a closed circle or a shaded circle, and less than is going to imply that I'm going to the left. So these two shaded regions will meet in the middle right here. So there's my graphed number line of this inequality or algebraic form. So all the shaded pieces, each shaded piece you have on a number line is going to represent a single interval. So again, we only have one shaded part, so I'm only going to have one interval. We can see that this one, the lowest it goes is -6. It goes up to +4. -6 has a closed circle, so I get a parenthesis. +4 has a, -6 has an open circle, so I get a parenthesis. +4 has a closed circle, so it gets a bracket. And there's my interval. So let's do one more. Let's say that x is less than or equal to -3 and greater than 2. So we know x is less than or equal to -3. So here's -3. It gets a closed circle. And it's less than, so I'm shading to the left. And we also have that x is greater than 2. So we know 0's in there somewhere, and here's 2. Strictly greater than, so I get an open circle, and since it's greater than, I'm shading to the right. Here my shaded portions don't overlap, so I actually have two different shaded pieces, which means I'm going to have two different intervals. So looking at the left side here, again, this is going off to the left with no limitation, no restriction, nothing stopping it, so it's going all the way down to quote-unquote -infinity. So the smallest value in this interval would be -infinity, and the highest it can go is up to -3. Again, -infinity is not actually a number, so it can't be included, so it gets a parenthesis. -3 has the closed circle, it's equal to, so it gets a bracket. And the right shaded portion for x greater than 2, the smallest number in this interval is going to be 2. And we see it goes off to the right to infinity. Again, infinity gets a parenthesis. 2 has an open circle. It's not included or equal to, so it gets a parenthesis. And generally, when we have multiple intervals, we'll use a U for union. So we have -infinity to -3, union 2 to infinity. There's our interval notation.